Welcome to MogulCast, where we uncover the stories behind the world's greatest business empires. Let's get into today's story.
One handshake. No lawyer, no contract, and about $50 to his name. That is what Phil Knight carried into a meeting with a Japanese shoemaker, asking strangers to trust an American, nobody with their shoes. He was a middle-distance runner from the University of Oregon with no company, no factory, and no proof any of this would work. Today, Nike's brand alone has been valued at more than $32 billion. This is the full story. And it is worse than you think. Phil Knight was not a shoe designer. He was a middle-distance runner at the University of Oregon, coached by Bill Bowerman, a man obsessed with shaving ounces off every athlete's feet. Knight believed cheaper, better-made running shoes could beat the dominant brands of the era, but he had no factory, no investors, and barely any savings. What he had was an idea and a plane ticket to Japan. We will come back to one specific decision. It is the key to everything. With roughly $50 in his pocket, Knight traveled to Japan, walked into a meeting with executives from Onitsuka Tiger, a Japanese shoemaker he had never worked with before. He introduced himself as the representative of a company that did not really exist yet and asked them to let him sell their running shoes in the United States. There was no signed contract, no legal team, no guarantee. Just a handshake and a promise that an unknown American would move their shoes. The handshake worked. On January 25, 1964, Knight and Bowerman formally launched their company, Blue Ribbon Sports, in Eugene, Oregon, to import and sell those Japanese running shoes. There was no storefront. Knight sold pairs out of the trunk of his own car at track meets up and down the West Coast, handing shoes directly to runners who trusted his old coach's name more than any advertisement. It was slow, unglamorous, and completely dependent on one overseas partner delivering on their word. Blue Ribbon Sports grew fast enough that on May 30th, 1971, the company rebranded entirely, officially becoming Nike, Inc., named after the Greek goddess of victory. A new logo, the swoosh, appeared for the first time, and a company that once ran out of a car trunk was suddenly building an identity that could stand on its own, separate from any single overseas supplier. But not everyone was celebrating. But here's what the media completely got wrong about this. The popular version of the Nike origin story often puts Phil Knight himself in that first legendary pair of Bowerman's handmade shoes. Olympic gold medalist Otis Davis, who Bowerman coached at the University of Oregon, has said that is not true. According to Davis, his coach made that very first pair for him, not for Knight. It is a small detail, but it undercuts the flattering, founder-centered version of the legend most people repeat. The real strategy was simpler than any myth. Sell directly to the people who actually used the product. Instead of chasing department store shelf space, Knight and Bowerman built relationships with coaches and runners first, letting performance on the track do the marketing. Every pair sold out of that car trunk was also a referral to the next team, the next meet, the next runner. It was slow growth by design, and it built a level of trust no advertising budget could buy. A handshake built Blue Ribbon Sports, but a handshake could also break it. As sales grew, the relationship with their Japanese supplier grew strained. There had never been a real contract locking in the partnership, only trust between two sides who had never fully aligned on where the business was headed. The company that started with $50 and a promise was suddenly facing a partner it could not fully control, and a future it could not fully predict. Rather than wait for the partnership to collapse completely, Knight made the call that defined the rest of the company's history: build an identity that did not depend on anyone else's name. That decision produced Nike Inc.'s its own logo and its own products, a complete break from the arrangement that had made the entire business possible in the first place. It meant walking away from the very relationship that had turned $50 and a handshake into a real company. And if you have made it this far, you already understand something most analysts completely missed. The same informality that let Phil Knight start a global company with almost nothing was the exact same weakness that nearly cost him everything once the trust broke down. There was no contract to fall back on, no legal safety net, only the goodwill of a partner an ocean away. A handshake can build an empire, it does not always protect one. Decades after that first handshake, Nike became the world's largest supplier of athletic shoes and apparel, and a major manufacturer of sports equipment. In its 2022 fiscal year, the company reported revenue in excess of $46 billion. The brand that began as a side project selling imported shoes out of a car trunk now sponsors some of the most recognizable athletes and teams on the planet, all built on top of that original $50 bet. By 2024, Nike employed roughly 83,700 people worldwide and ranked 239th on the Forbes Global 2000 list of the world's largest public companies. Back in 2018, it had already ranked 89th on the Fortune 500. The Nike brand itself, valued at $29.60 billion in 2017, was worth more than $32 billion by 2020, making it the most valuable brand in the sports business, built on the same swoosh that first appeared in 1971. Remember that decision we mentioned at the start? Here is what it actually cost. Trusting a handshake instead of a contract let Phil Knight start Blue Ribbon Sports with almost nothing, but it also meant that when the relationship with his Japanese partner fractured, he had no legal claim to fall back on. He did not lose money in that moment. He lost the name, the shoes, and the identity he had built the company around and had to start over as Nike. Here is Nike by the numbers. It started with about $50 and a handshake in the early 1960s. Blue Ribbon Sports was founded on January 25, 1964. The company became Nike Inc. on May 30, 1971. By its 2022 fiscal year, revenue exceeded $46 billion. By 2024, Nike employed roughly 83,700 people and ranked 239th on the Forbes Global 2000. And the brand alone, just the name and the swoosh, has been valued at more than $32 billion. Here's the part almost nobody expects. Nike did not begin with an invention. Phil Knight did not design a shoe, build a factory, or patent anything. He found a better product someone else had already made and bet everything on his ability to sell it and to be trusted by the people who made it. The company that turned Just Do It into one of the most valuable brands on earth began as a distribution deal, not a creation story. Phil Knight turned about $50 and a single handshake into one of the most valuable brands on the planet. But that same trust-based bet very nearly cost him the entire company before it truly began. It is proof that empires are not always built on inventions. Sometimes they are built on nerve. If you want to understand how this exact pattern repeats across other major business empires, the next video covers a story with disturbing parallels. That one is next.
That's the story for today on MogulCast. If you found this valuable, subscribe and hit the bell. A new empire story drops every single weekday. See you tomorrow.